What happens when the owner of the world's most beloved voice walks into what should have been a simple daytime television interview, only to face the most shocking confrontation of his entire career? In just 34 seconds, one venomous comment from Denise Welch would transform Sir David Attenborough from honored guest to defending target. And what followed next left millions of viewers across Britain absolutely stunned. This is the story of how a 98-year-old legend was pushed to his breaking point on live television, exposing the toxic reality of modern daytime TV and reminding us all why some people earn respect, while others simply demand it. The ITV studios buzzed with anticipation that Wednesday morning as Sir David Attenborough made his way through the familiar corridors toward the Loose Women set. At 98 years old, the legendary broadcaster had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his latest documentary series about ocean conservation and climate change, topics he had dedicated his entire life to championing. The production team had assured him it would be a friendly conversation, a chance to connect with daytime viewers about the urgent environmental issues facing our planet. What he walked into instead would become one of the most jaw-dropping moments in British television history, a collision between grace and hostility that nobody saw coming. Sir David settled into the guest chair, his gentle smile warm and genuine as he greeted the panel with the same courtesy he had shown to every interviewer throughout his 7-decade career. Denise Welch sat at the center of the presenter's desk, flanked by Ruth Langsford, Colleen Nolan, and Janet Street Porter. The studio audience applauded warmly, clearly thrilled to be in the presence of a living legend whose voice had narrated their childhoods and whose passion had inspired generations to care about the natural world. But there was something in Denise's expression, a tightness around her mouth, a coldness in her eyes, that suggested this interview would not follow the usual warm script. "So, Sir David," Denise began, her voice carrying an edge that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Here you are again, still telling us all how to live our lives and what we should be worried about. Don't you think after nearly 100 years, you might be a bit out of touch with what modern people actually care about?" The question landed like a slap across the face. The audience fell silent, confused by the sudden hostility. Sir David's warm smile faltered just slightly, replaced by a look of mild surprise, but his voice remained steady and kind when he responded. "Well, Denise, I think the natural world and its preservation are concerns that transcend generations. The issues we face today with climate change and biodiversity loss affect everyone, regardless of age." His tone was patient, educational, the same voice that had explained the wonders of nature to billions of people over decades. Ruth Langsford immediately sensed the tension building and tried to redirect the conversation toward safer ground. "Sir David, we're all so grateful you're here today. Your new documentary series sounds absolutely fascinating. Can you tell us more about what inspired this particular project?" But before Sir David could answer, Denise cut across her colleague with barely concealed irritation. "Oh, please, Ruth, let's not pretend this is anything new. It's the same doom and gloom message he's been peddling for years. Polar bears, melting ice caps, plastic in the ocean. We've heard it all before, haven't we?" The other panelists exchanged worried glances. Colleen Nolan's mouth had fallen open slightly in shock while Janet Street Porter looked down at her notes, clearly uncomfortable with where this was heading. The studio audience began to murmur, confused whispers spreading through the rows as people tried to process what they were witnessing. "Sir," David maintained his composure with the grace of someone who had faced far more dangerous situations than a hostile television presenter. "With respect, Denise, these aren't just messages I'm peddling, as you put it. These are scientifically documented crises that require urgent attention. The natural world doesn't care about whether we've heard the message before. It simply responds to our actions or lack thereof." His voice remained calm, measured, but there was a firmness there now, a subtle shift that suggested the legendary broadcaster was not about to be dismissed so easily. Denise leaned forward, her expression hardening into something uglier. "Scientifically documented," she repeated mockingly. or conveniently exaggerated to keep you relevant and keep those documentary deals rolling in. Let's be honest, you've built quite the empire on making people feel guilty about their lifestyles, haven't you? The studio went completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze in disbelief. Ruth Langsford's face had gone pale, while Colleen Nolan actually gasped audibly. Janet Street Porter looked up sharply, her expression shifting from discomfort to outright anger. The audience's murmuring grew louder, no longer confused but clearly upset by what they were hearing. Sir David straightened slightly in his chair, his decades of professionalism and dignity clearly being tested. "I'm sorry, but I find that suggestion rather offensive," he said quietly. "Every claim I've ever made in my documentaries has been backed by peer-reviewed scientific research. I've spent my entire life trying to help people understand and appreciate the natural world, not to profit from fear." His voice remained controlled, but there was hurt in it now. Genuine hurt that this woman would question not just his work, but his integrity and life's purpose. "Oh, come on," Denise shot back, her voice rising with what seemed like genuine contempt. "You fly around the world in private jets and helicopters, staying in luxury accommodations, all while telling ordinary people they should feel bad about taking a holiday flight to Spain. The hypocrisy is staggering." Colleen Nolan couldn't stay silent any longer, her voice tight with embarrassment. "Denise, I really think you're being incredibly unfair here. Sir David has dedicated his entire life to environmental conservation and education." Ruth tried again to salvage the interview. "Perhaps we could talk about some of the positive conservation success stories from the new series. I'm sure our viewers would love to hear about that." But Denise was clearly on a mission now, seemingly energized by Sir David's discomfort and the shocked reaction from her colleagues. "Positive stories," Denise laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "That's not what sells, though, is it, David? It's all about the disaster, the crisis, the emergency. Keep people scared, and they'll keep watching. Keep them guilty, and they'll keep buying your books and DVDs." The accusation hung in the air, like poison. Sir David sat very still for a moment, his famous blue eyes studying Denise with an expression that mixed sadness with something approaching pity. Then he spoke, and his voice carried a weight that commanded absolute attention. "In my 70 years of broadcasting," he began slowly, "I have been interviewed by journalists from every corner of the globe. I've faced skeptics, critics, and people who genuinely disagreed with my message. But I have never, in all that time, been accused of exploiting environmental crises for personal profit. That you would suggest such a thing reveals more about your own cynicism than it does about my work." Janet Street Porter finally found her voice, and it was sharp with anger directed at her colleague. "Denise, this is absolutely disgraceful. Sir David Attenborough is a national treasure who has done more for conservation and environmental awareness than any broadcaster in history. How dare you sit there and accuse him of being some kind of charlatan?" "Don't you tell me what I can and cannot say, Janet," Denise snapped back. "This is my segment, and I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. If Sir David can't handle a bit of honest scrutiny, perhaps he shouldn't be doing interviews." The audience was no longer simply murmuring. Several people were shaking their heads in obvious disapproval, while others were calling out expressions of support for Sir David. One woman near the front actually shouted, "That's disgusting," toward the presenter's desk. Ruth Langsford looked genuinely distressed now, torn between her role as co-host and her obvious sympathy for their guest. "Sir David, I want to apologize on behalf of the show. This is not the conversation we had planned, and it's certainly not the respect you deserve." But Sir David raised his hand gently, a small gesture that somehow commanded immediate attention. "It's quite all right, Ruth," he said with remarkable grace. "I think it's important that we address these accusations directly." He turned back to face Denise, and despite his age and the shocking treatment he was receiving, there was steel in his gaze now. "You suggest that I exploit environmental crises for profit. Let me be very clear about something. I have given the vast majority of my earnings from documentaries and books to conservation charities and research initiatives. I have spent months away from my family, sleeping in tents and basic accommodations, often in dangerous conditions, not because it was glamorous or profitable, but because I believed the stories needed to be told. Denise rolled her eyes dramatically, a gesture so dismissive and disrespectful that several audience members actually booed. Oh, please spare us the martyr routine. You're sitting there with your knighthood and your millions telling working class people they're destroying the planet because they drive a diesel car or use plastic bags. It's patronizing and out of touch. Colleen Nolan stood up from her chair, something almost unheard of during a live broadcast. Her voice shook with emotion as she addressed her colleague. Denise, I cannot sit here and watch you treat our guest this way. Sir David came here in good faith to talk about important issues, and you're turning this into some kind of personal attack. It's shameful. Sit down, Colleen, Denise commanded coldly. You're being overly emotional as usual. I'm conducting a proper interview, not a fan club meeting. The condescension in Denise's voice seemed to be the final straw for Sir David, the 98-year-old legend, who had remained remarkably composed throughout the assault on his character and life's work, now leaned forward slightly. His voice when he spoke was quiet but carried such authority that every person in the studio hung on his words. A proper interview, he repeated slowly, as if examining the phrase. Denise, a proper interview involves asking questions in good faith and actually listening to the answers. What you've done here today is come to this conversation with your mind already made up, determined to paint me as some kind of hypocritical profiteer, regardless of the truth. You're not interested in discussing environmental issues or conservation. You're interested in tearing down someone you perceive as an easy target because of my age. Janet Street Porter was nodding vigorously now, her earlier discomfort replaced by open support for Sir David. He's absolutely right, Denise. This isn't journalism. It's just mean-spirited and cruel. You should be ashamed of yourself. But Denise was far from finished, and if anything, the criticism from her colleagues seemed to fuel her hostility. Ashamed, she practically spat. I'll tell you what I'm ashamed of. I'm ashamed that we continue to give platforms to people who are completely disconnected from reality. You live in a bubble, David, surrounded by yes men and people who treat you like some kind of saint. Meanwhile, real people are struggling with the cost of living, trying to heat their homes and put food on the table. And you're telling them they need to worry about some species of beetle in the Amazon rainforest. The audience erupted. What had started as uncomfortable murmuring exploded into audible gasps and angry shouts. Several people stood up, pointing at Denise with clear disgust on their faces. One man yelled, "You're out of order," while a woman near the back shouted, "Leave him alone." Ruth Langsford looked close to tears, clearly mortified by what was happening on her show. Sir David's face had gone slightly pale, but when he spoke again, his voice was steady and filled with quiet dignity. The fact that you see caring about the natural world and caring about people's economic struggles as mutually exclusive speaks volumes. Denise, these issues are interconnected. Climate change and environmental destruction disproportionately affect the poorest communities. The people you claim to speak for are often the ones who suffer most from ecological collapse. But I suspect you already know that. I suspect this isn't really about protecting working-class people at all. This is about something else entirely. Colleen Nolan, still standing, addressed the cameras directly. I want everyone watching at home to know that this behavior does not represent this show or this panel. Sir David Attenborough is a gentleman and a legend, and he deserves nothing but respect and gratitude for his lifetime of service. Denise whirled on her colleague, her face flushed with anger. Don't you dare speak for this show, Colleen. I'm the lead presenter on this panel today, and I will conduct this interview however I see fit. No, Colleen, Ruth Langsford said firmly, finding her courage at last. You won't. This has crossed every line of professionalism and decency. This needs to stop right now. But Denise ignored her colleagues and turned back to Sir David with renewed venom. You want to know what this is really about, David? It's about the fact that your generation has had its time. You've had your platform, your influence, your moment in the sun. But the world has moved on, and you can't accept it. You're clinging to relevance by any means necessary, even if it means scaremongering and guilt-tripping people into paying attention to you. The words seemed to reverberate through the studio like a physical force. Sir David sat very still, his hands folded in his lap. But something had shifted in his demeanor. The gentle, patient educator was still there, but now there was something else too, a deep sadness mixed with profound disappointment. Janet's street porter actually stood up and walked toward Denise, her face dark with anger. "That is enough," she said, her voice shaking. "You are completely out of control, and you need to stop this right now. Sir David has shown you nothing but courtesy, and you're treating him like he's done something wrong. The only person who should be ashamed here is you." But Denise seemed beyond reason now, her voice rising to nearly a shout. "I'm out of control. I'm the only one here willing to ask the difficult questions. I'm the only one not treating him like he's above criticism, just because he's old and famous." The studio audience had become a wall of hostility toward Denise now. People were booing openly, many shaking their heads in disgust. Some had their phones out, clearly recording what they recognized as a moment of television infamy in the making. Ruth Langsford moved closer to Sir David, her voice gentle and apologetic. "Sir David, I am so deeply sorry about this. Please know that we would love to continue this conversation properly if you're willing, without this hostility and these unfair accusations." Sir David looked up at Ruth and managed a small, sad smile. "You're very kind, Ruth, but I think it's clear that I'm not welcome here, at least not by everyone on this panel." He began to reach for his microphone, preparing to remove it, a gesture that sent a ripple of dismay through the audience. "Running away," Denise called out mockingly. "Can't handle a tough interview, so you're just going to walk off. That's very professional of you, David." The sarcasm dripping from her voice was the final insult in a long series of insults. Sir David paused, his hand on his microphone, and looked at Denise with an expression that somehow combined pity, disappointment, and unwavering dignity. "Running away," he repeated quietly. "No, Denise, I'm not running away. I'm simply refusing to participate in whatever this is. You see, I've spent my life trying to build bridges between people and the natural world. I've tried to inspire wonder, curiosity, and care. What you're doing here, this angry confrontation built on misrepresentation and personal attacks, this achieves nothing except to make yourself feel powerful, and others feel small. That's not strength, Denise. That's just sad." Colleen Nolan had tears streaming down her face now. "Sir David, please don't leave. You came here to talk about important work, and you deserve to be heard." Denise let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, here we go with the waterworks. Classic Colleen, always so emotional. Grow up, this is television, not a therapy session." The cruelty of that comment, dismissing her colleague's genuine emotion with such contempt, seemed to shock even Janet and Ruth. Janet moved to stand beside Colleen in a gesture of solidarity, while Ruth's expression hardened with anger toward Denise. Sir David stood up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate as befitted his age. The studio fell completely silent, everyone recognizing that they were witnessing something significant, something that would be talked about for years to come. "I have had the privilege," Sir David began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed studio, "of spending my life doing work that I love. I have traveled to every continent, witnessed the most extraordinary wonders of the natural world, and had the honor of sharing those experiences with audiences around the globe. I have met presidents and prime ministers, scientists and conservationists, and countless ordinary people who simply care about the planet we all share. In all of that time, through all of those encounters, I have tried to maintain my integrity, my honesty, and my respect for others. What I have encountered here today is something I hoped I would never face: a complete absence of respect, an unwillingness to engage in good faith, and a determination to create conflict rather than understanding." The audience began to applaud, tentatively at first but quickly growing in volume and intensity. The sound seemed to enrage Denise further. Her face flushed deep red as she looked around at the audience, then at her colleagues, clearly realizing she had lost the room completely. "Oh, wonderful," she said bitterly. Standing ovation for the victim. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Nobody wants to hear the truth. They just want to worship at the altar of St. David. Ruth Langsford's voice was ice cold when she spoke. The truth, Denise? What truth have you spoken here today? All I've heard are unfounded accusations, personal attacks, and a complete disregard for basic courtesy. You haven't challenged his science. You haven't engaged with his arguments. You've simply tried to tear down a good man for your own entertainment. Sir David removed his microphone carefully and placed it on the chair behind him. He looked at Ruth, Colleen, and Janet with genuine warmth. Thank you three for your kindness and your attempts to maintain some dignity during this encounter. You are clearly professionals who understand the importance of respectful discourse. Then he turned one final time to Denise, and his expression was one of profound sadness. Denise, I don't know what happened in your life to make you this bitter, this angry, this determined to tear others down. But I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, because it clearly isn't here. You've used your platform today, not to inform or inspire, but to attack someone who has never done you any harm. That says far more about you than it ever could about me. The words hung in the air with devastating finality. Denise opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She looked around desperately, seeking support from somewhere, anywhere, but found only disapproval and disappointment on every face. Janet Street Porter stepped forward and extended her hand to Sir David. It has been an absolute honor to share this panel with you, even under these circumstances. Your grace under pressure is extraordinary. Sir David shook her hand warmly. Thank you, Janet. Your support has been noted and greatly appreciated. Colleen approached next, wiping tears from her face. I'm so sorry you had to endure this. You are a hero to so many people, including me. Sir David's expression softened further. Please don't cry, dear. Some battles cannot be won with reason alone. Sometimes dignity and grace are the only weapons we need. Ruth took both of Sir David's hands in hers, her voice thick with emotion. On behalf of this show, this network, and everyone who believes in treating guests with respect, I am profoundly sorry. Please know that this does not represent who we are or what we stand for. Sir David nodded graciously. I know that, Ruth. The behavior of one person does not define an entire organization. You've all conducted yourselves admirably. He turned to face the main camera, speaking directly to the viewers at home with that familiar, beloved voice that had educated and inspired generations. To those watching, I want you to know that despite what you've witnessed here today, I remain hopeful about our future. We face extraordinary challenges as a species, but we also have extraordinary capacity for change, for compassion, and for action. Don't let moments like this discourage you from caring about the natural world. Don't let cynicism win. The planet needs people who give a damn, and I believe there are far more of those people than the alternative. The audience rose to their feet as one, the applause thunderous and sustained. Many people were crying, moved by his words and his unwavering dignity in the face of such hostile treatment. Sir David raised his hand in a gentle wave, that familiar gesture that had bid farewell to countless television audiences over 7 decades. Then he walked toward the exit, his posture straight, his head high, every inch the legend he had always been. As he reached the edge of the set, he paused and looked back, not at Denise, but at the audience who had supported him. He placed his hand over his heart in a gesture of gratitude that brought fresh tears to many eyes. Denise sat alone at the presenter's desk, isolated and thoroughly defeated. The cameras captured her face as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. She had expected to be the tough interviewer who asked hard questions. Instead, she had revealed herself to be cruel, small-minded, and completely out of her depth when faced with true class and dignity. Ruth, Janet, and Colleen stood together, their solidarity clear as they watched Sir David's exit. None of them looked at Denise. The message was clear. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence as Sir David disappeared from view. The audience continued to buzz with conversation, many people shaking their heads in disbelief. others openly discussing how disgusted they were with what they had just witnessed. Finally, Ruth Langsford spoke into the heavy silence, her voice steady but cold. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. When we return, we'll be discussing something that clearly needs to be addressed: the importance of treating every guest, every person, with basic human decency and respect. As the cameras cut away and the show went to commercial, the audience continued to discuss what they had witnessed. The energy in the studio had completely changed from excited anticipation at the start to shocked outrage at the treatment of a beloved national figure. Denise sat motionless at the desk, her colleagues having moved away from her as if her behavior was contagious. The final image before the break was one that would be shared millions of times across social media in the hours that followed. The empty chair where Sir David Attenborough had sat, a symbol of dignity walking away from cruelty, of grace refusing to engage with hostility, of a legend who understood that some battles are won not by fighting but by simply refusing to participate. The man who had walked into that studio as Britain's most beloved broadcaster had walked out as something even more, a living reminder that true class cannot be diminished by pettiness, that integrity cannot be shaken by accusations, and that sometimes the most powerful response to hostility is simply to maintain your dignity and walk away. In trying to diminish a giant, Denise Welch had only succeeded in revealing how small she truly was.